The missile flying over the Gulf and the missile falling towards Kiev may look like two separate wars. They are not separate to the United States. They draw from the same interceptor factories, the same reconnaissance fleets, the same senior commanders, the same political attention. And that creates a disturbing possibility. Vladimir Putin may not need Iran to defeat America. He may only need Iran to keep America defending, because every Patriot interceptor launched in the Middle East is an interceptor that must be replaced before it can protect a European city. Every surveillance aircraft sent south is an aircraft not watching Russia. Every week, Washington spends managing escalation with Tehran is a week in which Moscow can press Ukraine under a thinner umbrella. The available evidence does not prove that Putin ordered Iran to begin or prolong this war. Iran has its own objectives, its own grievances, and its own chain of command. But strategy is often less about secret control than compatible incentives. So the real question is not whether Iran is a Russian puppet. The real question is whether Iran has become Russia's second pressure point against the same American military system. And to answer that, we have to look at the three things modern wars consume fastest: missiles, machines, and mines. On February 28, 2026, U.S. Central Command began Operation Epic Fury against Iran. In its first 24 days, the command reported more than 9,000 combat flights and more than 9,000 targets struck. The public asset list included Patriot and THAAD missile defenses, bombers, fighters, reconnaissance aircraft, airborne command planes, electronic warfare aircraft, aerial tankers, carriers, submarines, and supply ships. That list matters because it shows the true scale of the commitment. This is not only a bombing campaign, it is an ecosystem. The aircraft dropping weapons are the visible edge. Behind them are tankers, data links, intelligence analysts, satellite tasking, maintenance crews, munitions planners, base defenses, and ships protecting the ships that protect the operation. The conventional explanation is simple. The United States moved those assets because Iran threatened American forces, allies, and shipping. That explanation is true. It is also incomplete. A military asset can be necessary in one theater and still create an opportunity in another. Russia does not have to cause the American deployment to benefit from it. It only has to recognize what the deployment removes from Europe. This is the framework for the entire story. Call it the two-theater tax. The tax is paid from three accounts. Account one is interceptors, the physical missiles used to stop ballistic missiles and drones. Account two is machines, sensors, aircraft, ships, crews, and maintenance capacity. Account three is mines, diplomatic energy, intelligence focus, presidential time, and alliance cohesion. When all three accounts are charged at once, the strongest military in the world can still become strategically thinner. Start with the simplest arithmetic. Iran fires a missile. The defender may launch one interceptor, sometimes more, because missing is not an acceptable option when the target is a barracks, a command center, an airfield, or a city. But an interceptor does not reappear when the smoke clears. It returns through a factory chain: rocket motors, seekers, electronics, energetic materials, quality testing, transport, and trained crews. The battlefield works in seconds. The industrial base works in months and years. Reuters reported in March that roughly 600 PS-3 interceptors were being produced annually at the time, and that this output was already insufficient for US requirements, Gulf allies, and Ukraine. Lockheed Martin announced an ambitious expansion, but the larger production would arrive too late to solve the immediate shortage. The Army's own 2026 budget documents underline the constraint. They price a PAC-3 MSE missile at roughly $4 million and describe annual production capacity in the hundreds, not the thousands that a multi-theater missile war can demand. That is why the cost exchange story is only half the issue. A cheap attacking drone can force an expensive defensive response, but the deeper problem is inventory time. Money can be authorized overnight. A precision interceptor cannot be manufactured overnight. By July, the consequence was visible in Ukraine. Reuters reported that Ukrainian air defenses failed to stop any of 23 ballistic missiles in one major attack around Kyiv, and that a Ukrainian defense advisor said the country had effectively run out of the Patriot missiles needed for that mission. Days later, Russia launched another 41 missile assault on the capital and other cities as Kyiv continued to describe interceptor supply as its top priority. This is where Moscow's incentive becomes clear. Russia does not need every Iranian missile to hit. It benefits when Iranian launches force the United States and its partners to spend scarce defensive rounds. The successful interception still consumes the interceptor. From the perspective of a war of production, a miss can be strategically useful if it empties the defender's magazine. Put differently, Iran can lose the exchange in the sky and still help Russia win time on the factory floor. Interceptors are only the ammunition. The second account is the architecture around them. A modern missile defense network needs early warning, tracking, classification, command and control, electronic warfare, aerial refueling, and constant maintenance. The official US list for the Iran operation included E-2D airborne early warning aircraft, U-2 and RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft, E-11 communications aircraft, multiple tanker types, and electronic warfare platforms. These are high-value, low-density assets. The United States owns more combat aircraft than any rival, but it does not possess an infinite number of the specialized platforms that make a theater-wide campaign coherent. An RC-135 collecting emissions over the Gulf cannot simultaneously collect them over the Baltic. A tanker orbit supporting bombers against Iran cannot refuel fighters on a different continent. A Patriot crew defending a Gulf base cannot train a European unit at the same time. A maintenance team cannot service two batteries in two theaters with the same hours. The strategic effect is not always a dramatic withdrawal from Europe. More often, it is friction. Exercises delayed, rotations extended, training compressed, readiness consumed, spare parts redirected, and commanders forced to decide which risk to accept. That friction is exactly what an adversary studies. In July, the United States was again surging special operation forces, fighters, bombers, medics, and other capabilities toward the Middle East. At the same moment, Russia was intensifying ballistic attacks on Ukrainian cities. This does not mean the Kremlin controls the timing of every Iranian attack. It means Moscow can schedule its own pressure when American defenses are visibly burdened. The most dangerous form of coordination may not require a joint operations room. It may simply require each side to watch where the other has forced the United States to move. The third account is the hardest to measure and perhaps the most important. Governments like to speak as though attention is unlimited. It is not. A president can receive briefings on several crises in one day, but the machinery beneath each briefing is finite. Lawyers review strike authorities, intelligence agencies redirect collection, diplomats call allies, military staffs draft options, congressional leaders demand answers, markets react, embassies evacuate. Every escalation generates meetings, and every meeting pulls senior people away from something else. On July 22nd, Reuters reported that U.S. brokered diplomacy over Ukraine had stalled while Washington was largely focused on Iran. The same report described President Volodymyr Zelensky pressing U.S. officials for faster action on Patriot production and missile supply. That is the attention drain in one frame. The negotiation intended to end Russia's war waits while the weapons needed to survive. Russia's war compete with a second conflict. Attention also affects alliances. Europe depends heavily on American systems that have few immediate substitutes, especially Patriot. The European Union Institute for Security Studies warned that the Iran war could delay deliveries, deepen Europe's window of vulnerability, and make support for Ukraine slower and less reliable. Moscow benefits from more than missing missiles. It benefits when Europeans begin doubting whether promised American weapons will arrive. It benefits when NATO governments compete for the same interceptors. It benefits when every capital asks the same nervous question. If two crises erupt, which ally comes first? That question weakens deterrence before a single NATO battery moves. To understand why this logic would appeal to the Kremlin, go back 60 years. In the mid 1960s, the Soviet Union did not fight the United States directly over North Vietnam. It supplied Hanoi with the tools to make American air power more expensive: surface-to-air missiles, radar, technicians, training, and an expanding air defense system. A declassified U.S. document from November 1966 recorded that North Vietnamese forces had launched at least 949 Soviet-designed SA-2 missiles against American strike aircraft since July 1965, destroying 32 manned aircraft. By raw arithmetic, that looks inefficient, but the memo immediately made the more important point. The limiting effect on American strike forces was greater than the number of aircraft actually destroyed. That is the pattern. The missile does not have to kill the aircraft to change the mission. It can force the aircraft lower, farther, later, or into a more complex package. It can demand jamming aircraft, escort fighters, rescue helicopters, intelligence flights, and repeated strikes against the air defense network itself. The Soviet investment was small compared with the cost imposed on the United States. Moscow could increase American risk without sending Soviet divisions into direct combat. The modern version is not identical. Iran is not North Vietnam. Russia is no longer the Soviet Union. And today's United States is not fighting the same kind of war. But the reusable principle survives. Help a regional partner create a defensive and offensive problem that forces the rival superpower to spend more than you do. During the Cold War, the currency was aircraft, sorties, and political patience. Today, the currency is interceptors, sensor coverage, and industrial lead time. Russia and Iran did not become close because they trust each other completely. They became close because both needed what the other had. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Iranian-designed Shahed drones gave Moscow a cheap, long-range weapon for attacking Ukrainian infrastructure. Russia then absorbed the design, expanded domestic production, and developed more capable variants. In January 2025, Putin and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian signed a comprehensive strategic partnership treaty. Its text calls for deeper security and defense cooperation, coordination at regional and global levels, and information exchange between intelligence and security services. But the treaty is not a NATO-style alliance. It contains no automatic mutual defense obligation. Carnegie's analysis described it as a formalization of deep ties, rather than a commitment by Moscow to fight if Iran is attacked. That distinction is crucial. Putin can prefer an Iran that survives without wanting to risk Russian forces in an open war with the United States. He can provide technology, intelligence, diplomatic cover, cyber assistance, or replacement components while keeping the relationship below the threshold of direct combat. There is growing evidence that some of this may already be happening, though the most sensitive claims remain disputed. Reuters reported in April that a Ukrainian assessment and a regional security source alleged Russian cyber support and satellite imagery had helped Iran refine attacks. In July, Reuters reported that U.S. analysts were investigating whether Russia assisted Iranian strikes on CIA facilities with targeting information or enhanced drone technology. The analysts had not reached a firm conclusion. That uncertainty should not be hidden. It is possible Iran independently identified some targets. It is possible Russia's support is narrower than reported, and public intelligence claims during war deserve scrutiny. But even the confirmed baseline matters. The two states exchange military experience, share a hostility to US power, and have already transferred weapons knowledge in both directions. The result is a feedback loop. Iran helped Russia learn how to mass produce cheap attack drones for Europe. Russia can help Iran make those drones harder to jam, more accurate, or more intelligently targeted in the Middle East. And every improvement increases the cost of American defense in both theaters. At this point, there's serious objection to the entire argument. A prolonged Iran war can hurt Russia too. Iranian factories and military infrastructure can be destroyed. A weakened Tehran may have fewer drones, missiles, and components to share. Regional chaos can become uncontrollable. A direct US-Russian confrontation would be catastrophic. And if Iran's government collapsed, Moscow could lose a strategic partner altogether. Russia has repeatedly called for restraint and ceasefires. Its treaty with Iran contains no mutual defense clause. The US intelligence community's 2026 assessment described the cooperation among Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea as selective, bilateral, constrained by divergent interests, and limited by fear of directly confronting the United States. All of that is real. So the thesis needs refinement. Putin's preferred outcome is probably not unlimited war. It is not Iranian conquest. It is not necessarily the destruction of the Gulf economy. And it is certainly not a nuclear exchange. The outcome that best serves Moscow is narrower. Iran survives, America remains engaged, the conflict stays costly, and Russia avoids becoming a formal belligerent, not a victorious Iran, a durable Iran, a state capable of firing enough missiles to keep American defenses loaded, but not so recklessly that it triggers its own total destruction. This is difficult to control. Tehran is an autonomous actor, not a chess piece. That is why this is an incentive, not an established master plan. But incentives can align even when command does not. This is the point where the entire story changes. The visible contest is Iran versus American air power. The deeper contest is Russia versus the American allocation system. Washington may destroy Iranian launchers, intercept incoming missiles, protect bases, and still face a strategic loss if the campaign consumes the margin that once protected Europe. Because Moscow is not competing with the United States platform for platform. It is competing with the gap between American commitments and American replacement speed. The United States has promised to deter Russia, defend NATO, support Ukraine, protect Gulf allies, secure shipping, reinforce Israel, and preserve forces for Asia. Each commitment may be defensible on its own. The vulnerability appears when they mature at the same time. That is why Putin's best weapon in this story may not be a Russian missile. It may be the American interceptor fired at an Iranian one. The defender sees a successful kill. Moscow sees a canister that must be refilled. The defender sees a carrier arriving in the Gulf. Moscow sees maintenance hours, escorts, tankers, and command attention leaving the common pool. The defender sees two regional crises. Moscow sees one global inventory. This is why a quick Iranian victory is not necessary. A quick victory might even end the drain. The strategic value lies in survival. Enough hardened launchers, mobile systems, dispersed command, and political cohesion to keep the American machine operating at a tempo its factories cannot quickly replenish. The objective is not to knock America out in one blow. It is to keep the strongest military in the world paying the two-theater tax until one of its promises arrives late. There are three broad futures. In the first, Iran's missile force is rapidly suppressed and a durable settlement follows. The interceptor drain slows, US assets return to other missions, and Russia loses the opportunity. This is the outcome Moscow has the least incentive to help produce. In the second, the conflict freezes at a lower level. Iran retains a residual missile and drone force. The United States keeps significant defenses in the region, and periodic attacks continue. Russia gains a persistent but manageable diversion. In the third, the war becomes a long contest of launches, repairs, reprisals, and temporary ceasefires. Interceptor demand remains high. American forces rotate through the Gulf. European deliveries slip. Russia tests Ukrainian air defenses more aggressively and uses every shortage to improve its bargaining position. This third scenario offers Moscow the greatest advantage and the greatest danger for everyone else. Because systems under strain do not always fail gradually. They can appear stable until one attack arrives, after the ready magazine has been emptied, one maintenance cycle has been skipped, or one ally discovers the promised shipment has been reassigned. The risk is not that the United States suddenly has no air defenses. The risk is that it must choose what gets defended first. Strategists describe this as allocation, readiness, and force posture. Ordinary people experience it as a night without sleep. In Kyiv, a family listens for the sound that means a ballistic missile has passed through the defensive layer. In the Gulf, soldiers watch a radar track divide into possible targets. Somewhere in the United States, a factory crew works another shift on a missile whose destination has not yet been decided. None of those people controls the grand strategy, yet all of them live inside its arithmetic. That is the final answer to our question. Putin has a strong incentive to see Iran drain America's air defenses because the same American system protects several theaters, while Russia only needs one of those theaters to become underdefended. But incentive is not proof of command. Iran is not merely Russia's ally, and it is not merely Russia's instrument. It is an independent power whose war can create strategic advantages Moscow did not design and cannot fully control. The danger is not a perfect conspiracy. The danger is something more common. Separate governments discovering that the same crisis rewards them in compatible ways. If this analysis helped you see the connection between the Gulf and Europe, subscribe to the channel. We will keep following the military economics, the hidden trade-offs, and the decisions that shape what happens next. And I'll see you in the next video, because in a two-theater war, the most important missile may be the one that is no longer available.